Warning. The following audio drama contains scenes of graphic depictions surrounding the medieval Black Death, which may disturb some listeners. Discretion is advised. Previously.
There are so many dead around him. He cannot block out their voices.
Focus upon the flame, Elouan. Let it cast out the darkness surrounding you.
You and the light are one.
How does this end?
You will find yourself floating above your body. You'll notice a silver thread connected to your belly. It will break.
Bring out your dead! Bring them out!
Mother! Why have you sent me here? Why can you not tell me where he is, and I will go there?
As I have said when you've asked before, the map is not mine to reveal. It is you and your father's, and those you share the journey with.
We're not even dead, yet you come in here and steal our things?
You will just be dead along with him in the next few days.
Then I'll probably be the one carrying out your bodies.
You blue-eyed demon?
She is here for you, Humphrey. You can let go of your guilt now about her death. Reach. Reach.
Surrender not the flame. Episode 7. Fields of Hope and Sorrow. Humphrey's body rested among the corpses in the mass grave, the coveted dusty sandals around his neck. Beside him, the plague-ravaged cadavers of Bishop Jean and, sadly, little Leo, showing the pestilence spared no one in terms of rank or privilege.
Where is he now?
As long as we live here on earth, we will never know the true makings of heaven.
That's the devil!
Elouan and Rachel spun around to see the gatekeeper from the previous night's raid hefting a large broadsword. Alongside him were his comrades, Broken Nose brandishing a pitchfork, his face cloth still stained with dry blood, and Broken Jaw, his head wrapped to keep the jaw in place, wielding a spear. This time they brought backup in the form of 6 men. 3 wielded primitive farming tools, while the remaining trio counted on their own brute size.
He's not normal.
He has done nothing but help others.
The devil deceives.
Elouan leaned into Rachel.
Whatever you do, stay away from the burial. Forgive me.
He gently pushed her aside, then stepped toward the mob. Rachel didn't understand the apology, but knew whatever was going to happen next would reveal the need. Elouan closed his eyes for a brief second to focus, consolidate his energy, and heighten his senses. When everything coalesced, time itself crawled, which gave him greater speed and sensitivity in the perception of his opponent's now moments. Intuition could be relied upon for guidance, and he could let go of his sense of individualized self and follow simply what must be done to disable the attackers. Physical combat was never something he enjoyed because most people approached it as separate entities, us versus them, thus losing sight of all life's interconnectedness as he had been taught. Combat, like everything else, had to be considered within a greater context, and to realize the usual opponent in the world will not come with that awareness. In other words, combat must only be used as a last resort, and with a sense of compassion for the combatant and the scenario that led him to pick a fight or lash out. In some cases, the fight may be considered a tool for an opponent's greater learning, which may require significant pain to spur the adversary in considering more deeply the nature of his inner self in relation to his outer experience. The fighting itself was never something to be emotionally tied to. Instead, it was a means to expanded education and personal awareness. Naturally, such frameworks surrounding combat involve many possible techniques, which is why the courses in physical combat at Elouan's mystery school were much longer and more in-depth than many other lessons. Several levels of combat training combined with skills in mental and inner awareness created a ladder of progressive knowledge, understanding, and prowess. The average person fought with the objective of defeating their opponent, striking out with emotion and drive, with occasional training. But the mystery school taught to fight with strategy, to disarm and inspire inner transformation in the adversary, because on a certain level, they were connected to you and a part of you. But sometimes transformation required extreme measures, lest the lesson be overlooked. It was this thought foremost in Elouan's mind as he strategized his process of adversarial disarmament, and to which he felt obligated to apologize to Rachel in advance. With his inner self detached emotionally from the combat, his awareness could move freely within the fullness of the experience to anticipate, predict accurately, and gain foreknowledge of what certain actions would produce, thus direct the sequences to the conclusion. Broken Nose advanced first, hoping to skewer Elouan with his pitchfork. Elouan faced him head-on, knowing the temptation to thrust the spikes in a blunt forward maneuver would be too overwhelming to avoid. What Broken Nose didn't know was that energy always preceded physical movement, and such energy carried with it details understood by the subconscious. With this information, Elouan could predict the opponent's actions, whether hitting, kicking, or thrusting, and react appropriately. In this case, Elouan twisted his body seconds before the physical push of the pitchfork came his direction. The tine slid past his chest, missing his flesh, and altogether surprising Broken Nose. In that split second of amazement, Elouan nabbed the pitchfork at its handle and returned the thrust, throwing Broken Nose on his rear. The corpse carrier kept a firm grip on the pole, which Elouan anticipated, as he dragged the thief in a semicircle around to the pit, then thumped the weapon with such force that Broken Nose let go and toppled into the mass grave. He slipped on the decaying bodies and fell backward onto the heap. Several onlookers gazed in horror of a living person squirming on the corpses of their loved ones.
Sacrilege!
Oh, God!
Meanwhile, Elouan remained focused in the flow of his plan, pitchfork still firmly in his grasp, as one of the unarmed combatants rushed to meet him. Elouan dropped to his knees and swiped the pitchfork, catching the hunter's legs and plunging the goon onto his backside. Then he raised his left arm above his head just as a second attacker came barreling down from behind. He fell into Elouan's hand, to which the Alpine Guardian clutched the assailant's shirt tightly and launched him over his head, landing him into the first hunter still lying on the ground. Then Elouan bounded for both collapsed men, going for the third unarmed vigilante, who was teeing himself up for an assault near the edge of the trench. Elouan bounced off his feet, landed on the backs of the two downed men in a handstand, twirled and met the next offender's face with his feet. The kick pitched the assailant into the trench. The offender clawed to climb out of the pit. The broken nose, reaching for his own safety, latched on and accidentally pulled him back in, forcing both of them deeper into the well of putrid bodies.
Oh, dear heavens!
You're desecrating!
Elouan pushed himself off the two hunters and came back on his feet. The second downed man climbed off his comrade, then launched himself at Elouan again. Instead of being a wall to block, Elouan fell onto his back and used the enemy's momentum. He caught the hunter with his feet and gave additional thrust to propel him into the crater.
Holy Jesus!
No sooner had the first fallen assailant stood up did he buckle again, as Rachel planted her foot furiously into his groin. As he instinctively doubled over, she grabbed him by the cloth mask and toppled him onto his side, where she proceeded to kick him repeatedly where his gonads met his ass. Satisfied he no longer had strength to move, she raced toward the cathedral. The gatekeeper could no longer bear how the fight was faring. His face boiled with rage as he brought the broadsword flailing toward Elouan's skull. But Elouan managed to block with the pitchfork. Hoping to settle the score from the previous evening, the enraged officer hurled a series of fast, well-trained maneuvers. Elouan moved his feet in an almost dance-like manner to position himself for a perfect block every time, frustrating him even more. The guardsman sped up the attack, coming at Elouan with a volley of different angles. It was the emotion Elouan had counted on. Though the gatekeeper came from multiple positions, the thrusts became sloppy. Elouan turned the assailants back toward the pit and caught the broadsword within the spines of the pitchfork. With a twist, he flung the weapon out of the fiend's hand, then planted the butt end of the fork into the thug's gut, toppling him into the trench.
Satan! You're the devil!
While Elouan still faced the pit, Broken Jaw pounced. He thrust the spear at Elouan's back, but the Guardian's intuition moved him quickly to the left, allowing the spear to pass harmlessly through the space between his upper body and right arm. Elouan closed his tricep tightly to his ribcage, pinning the spear against him. With a tug, he released it from Broken Jaw's grip, then faced the enemy, twirling the spear like a fan. Broken Jaw gazed in awe as the weapon whirled, knowing at some point it was going to come to a stop, most likely in his body. He could not think of how to defend himself. He just stood, paralyzed, believing his next injury may be worse than his last, which still ached like hell. Elouan knew what he was thinking and decided to startle him in an act of mercy. In a sudden flash, he stapled the lance into the ground and used it to boost his legs into the air. He caught Broken Jaw's throat between his knees, then forced him into the mud by the gravitational pull of body weight. Before the corpse carrier could get up, Elouan whipped the pole in 2 swipes, one by one knocking down a pair of assailants closing in, then returned the spear tip between Broken Jaw's eyes, stopping short of impaling him. Terrified, the corpse carrier crab-walked to get clear, then joined the remaining assailant who had yet to make his assault. They fled hastily to escape the Alpine Guardian's wrath. The onlookers gawked, horrified at the fight and desecration of the bodies. Elouan knew they were wondering if he was some unearthly demon. He also knew no verbal exchange would ease their fears. Rachel bounded in on a horse. Elouan leapt on, taking his place behind her.
I'm sorry.
Their souls are with God. Those are only shells.
Giovanni pounded dirt on a third grave, his face swollen from crying. His father's prediction of the plague not making it to the family's cottage was grossly mistaken. Within a week, Hero had contracted it, followed swiftly by Giovanni's youngest brother, Sanson, and then his mother, Iberia. How they caught the pestilence and how much longer the rest of Giovanni's family had left, he didn't know, but he was sure he wouldn't have to play parent for his remaining siblings too long. At present, he and Fina were still symptom-free, but Guillaume and Laetitia were already sick. Guillaume with the rash and spitting up blood, and Laetitia with a bubo under the arm. Moreover, the pestilence had decimated the sheep. Only a quarter of the herd remained. The neighbors hadn't fared any better. 2 out of the 6 cottages were now devoid of living occupants, leaving the fields untended and a host of livestock uncared for. Many fields would soon be drowned beneath weeds, while cattle, horses, pigs, and fowl already roamed wild. The beasts that succumbed to the illness remained rotting where they fell, either on the open road, edge of the field, or in the case of a cow who belonged to an entire family that had perished within days, inside the house. Neighbors dared not interact with each other or tend to the other's animals, lest they risked catching the deadly disease. Each tract of land where someone had died was considered poisoned and off-limits. The construction of the new parish church had long ceased. Only the frame remained amidst the blades of overgrown grass. Considering the blight, it would most likely disappear into the neglect of history.
Well, Monsieur Poacher, you can have any pick of the field you'd like these days.
Giovanni!
Rachel. Elouan.
The pair slid off the horse and raced his direction. A look of despair washed over them as they saw the graves. Giovanni fell into Elouan's arms. Laetitia and Guillaume shivered together under the blankets on the thatched pallet bed. Their faces were sunken, dark, and their bodies too racked with the disease to move beyond the soiled covers. Rachel stared with sad empathy, but having been witness to Sarah's family and her own father's death, what she saw produced nothing more than a menacing reality of déjà vu. Giovanni stood nearby, watching helplessly, while Fina cried in Elouan's arms. Giovanni led Elouan, Rachel, and Fina to sit in a circle around the hearth. Outside, the darkness of night dropped its cloak, the only light coming by the glow of the fire. Elouan noted Giovanni and Fina wiping their foreheads, but wasn't sure if it was due to the heat of the flames or a fever.
In one day, I saw it wipe out Bernard's whole family. Wife and 8 kids.
I heard some people go to bed at night totally well, then not wake up again in the morning. We sleep here by the fire, hoping the smoke will purify the air to keep it away from us.
She rolled the beads of a worn rosary in her fingers, her knuckles white from the grip.
Farmers started taking on the lands left behind by the neighbors.
We did.
But as death claimed more and more, no one wanted anything to do with each other, land or animals. The nobles, they took first right to a farmer's stock when he died. Now even they refuse. And if they could, they can't keep up with so many beasts.
But the animals are dying too.
There are still too many, with fewer and fewer people to look after them.
Driving the prices for selling and purchasing way down. There's no way to make money anymore. Soot.
The longer we stay, the more I think we are doomed.
But this is our house now. Our land.
Yours.
Yes. Your fiancé, I guess. He gave it to us.
For a price.
Fina's dejected face revealed she reluctantly made the payment and learned a valuable lesson in the process. Rachel checked her anger of Jehan taking repulsive advantage of the scourge to satisfy his wanton lust.
I never accepted him as my fiancé.
Elouan leaned forward and cupped a hand on Fina's wrist. When she looked into his eyes, he bathed her in a well of compassion, love, and forgiveness. Fina slipped her hand away to wipe a burgeoning tear.
Too bad, I'd say. He sits up there in his manor, surrounded by friends, sipping wine and nibbling treats all these days. I'm sure they talk nothing of this death, living life as if it isn't happening.
Elouan joined his despondent friend. He took Giovanni by the shoulders.
Let's consult the stars.
Please tell me, are we at the whim of death's whipping scythe? What do they say in mystery school about things such as this?
Love knows not death. True unconditional love is freedom. It promotes life, and it does not die when the ocean turns into mist, that turns into rain, and goes down the rivers back into the oceans again.
But are we worthy of love, being such sinners?
Elouan took his friend's face into his hands.
Listen to me. A seed contains the wholeness of the tree within it, just as you contain the wholeness of this universe's creator inside you. We came from this source, as an acorn comes from the tree that birthed it. What you call sin is simply ignorance, a lack of knowledge, which can be learned. We are all unfolding, like a flower blooming. You do not judge the flower before it has even a chance to stretch its petals and evoke its sweet aroma.
Giovanni gazed deeply into Elouan's eyes, taking in every word. Without thinking, he leaned in and kissed Elouan warmly on the lips. Perhaps because of the unmanageable stress, the possibility of being dead tomorrow, he wasn't sure, but he had grown tired of having to hide his feelings for other men, especially someone so unique as Elouan. He had admitted to himself long ago he could never feel such longing toward a girl, and now, being told he had within him the unfolding of the force of creation, was a seed of that power being carried forward, and that the disposition of the source was founded on love, he couldn't hold back any longer. Yet loving the same gender was cast as disgusting and heinous to everyone else in the world. The stigma came flooding back when he realized what he had done. Giovanni jumped, pulling himself from Elouan, looking startled and apologetic, even humiliated.
I know. You have nothing to apologize for. You are honoring me from a place in your soul, and that is the best any of us can ask, whether man or woman.
Elouan gave Giovanni an inquisitive look, wondering if the coughing might be the poacher. Giovanni's face tightened, ready to take on whoever it may be.
Who's there?
Sinners. Both of you sinners.
Giovanni tightened his palms into fists. No doubt whoever it was had seen him kiss Elouan.
Show yourself! Are you the one who's been stealing our livestock?
The thief fled into the thickness of the wood. Giovanni rushed into the grove after him. Elouan joined the pursuit. The density of the trees plummeted the grove into pitch blackness. Only by the sound of footfalls could any sense of direction and location of the intruder be intuitive. The opponent realized this, so stopped cold, leaving his pursuers lost in silence.
Where did he go?
Chances are high he is hiding against a tree.
He placed his hand on the nearest trunk. Instead of listening for footfalls or breath in the air, he instead moved his awareness to blend with the consciousness of the living tree beside him. From there, he could travel along its roots to all the other trees in the orchard, tapping them underground, until one also registered the life force of a person standing beside it. Elouan tested his theory by first sensing the roots of the tree near Giovanni. The response was evident. The tree knew Giovanni was standing there, and Elouan discerned such awareness. So he turned his focus to the whole of the orchard, moving from tree to tree through the roots, looking for the poacher. The answer came almost instantaneously, 4 rows away, off to the right, near the edge of a small clearing hidden within the grove. Elouan bolted for the thief. Knowing he had been discovered, the goon rushed away. Whether it was Elouan's speed or his ability to remain focused on the person's energy, he swiftly closed the gap in reaching the fiend. The offender faltered. Elouan nabbed him by the collar and tossed him into the moonlight.
Tavold! What in Christ's name are you doing?
Yes, it was Tavold, Giovanni's friend. His eyes burned with rage, face ruddy with the advancing pestilence.
You are both sinners, both of you. Perversions! I saw what you were doing back there. You're the devil! You brought this sickness upon us!
He did not, you fool.
We were all fine until he showed up.
You were the one stealing our sheep? Why?
You had more than enough.
Elouan dropped to Tavold's side and placed a hand an inch from his quaking body.
What are you doing?
Hopefully inspiring.
Tavold suddenly grabbed Elouan and spewed a glob of blood over his nose and cheeks.
See you in hell.
Dear Heavenly Father.
I know. Now I am most likely infected.
Hurried, Giovanni removed his shirt, ripped it into pieces, and started to wipe Elouan's face clean.
Not if I have anything to say about it. Not you. Not you.
The reaction from Rachel and Fina was what they expected. Terror. Giovanni had done a good job removing most of the spittle and burning the rags afterward, while Fina assisted Elouan to find a fermenting jug of ale Hero kept in a cupboard, which he used to wash himself clean. He did his utmost to downplay the possibility of contracting the illness. At first, the declaration didn't go over so well. However, after the wash of ale, downing a tea of his special herbs, and hanging his shirt near the hearth to disinfect it in the heat and smoke, everyone felt more at ease that perhaps he might survive the assault. When the adrenaline wore off, everyone grew heavy with exhaustion. Giovanni and Fina fell asleep near the fire, while Elouan pulled Rachel outside and commandeered the empty wagon from the livery. He insisted they stay off the ground and rest without hay or cloth to keep warm. They relied solely on the closeness of their bodies, falling asleep in no time. The beams of morning light cascaded into the tiny hovel to spotlight Letitia and Guillaume, dead in the bed, their skin already turned blue. Giovanni stood over them, tormented but unable to weep. Fina fell on her knees, buried her face in her hands, and bawled in agony. Elouan and Rachel helped to quickly bury the bodies. Giovanni and Fina retreated inside to mourn, while Elouan kept his gaze to the sky, face wet with tears. Rachel planted her forehead to his, joining in the grief.
I knew this would happen. I knew it. I do not see how this gets me any closer to my father.
What did he do?
He abandoned my mother when she was pregnant with me.
Rachel sat in shock from the scandalous disclosure. Such pregnancy would have resulted in public shaming, ruining not only Elouan's mother, but her entire family, perhaps even excommunication by the church parish. It was the height of sin, leaving him a bastard for eternity.
After I was born, my mother left me at a monastery high in the mountains. She found it, was guided there purely by her own senses. She should have stayed. Instead, she froze to death, making her way down, leaving me behind. The monks found her.
Rachel broke the remembrance with a warm kiss.
If we survive this,
I will always be with you.
Elouan and Rachel rushed in to find Fina with her right arm in the air, gawking in horror toward her armpit.
I have the lump. It's on me. I'm next.
Let me see!
He exposed the small egg shape bursting from Fina's side. He swiftly fell back while Fina shuddered. Elouan kept Fina's arm raised while he inspected the bubo. His mind raced to find a way to save her.
I'm going to die.
No, I saw people in the town survive.
He lowered Fina's arm and went about unpacking his herbal pouches. Then he slipped out his shaving knife. He returned to Fina carrying the pouches and blade, uplifted her arm, then re-examined the welt.
You will endure, as all life, endures.
What are you going to do?
Give her something to bite down on. Rachel, can you tear me the bottom of your dress to wrap her?
yes.
Giovanni placed a wooden spoon between Fina's teeth. She clenched hard as more tears streamed her cheeks. She knew what Elouan was preparing to do.
This will sting a little.
Elouan tossed the dagger into the smoldering fire and quickly applied herbs into the oozing wound. Rachel handed him her torn cloth, and with Giovanni's assistance, they wrapped it tightly around Fina's torso, keeping the bubo covered. When finished, Fina fell against the wall and collapsed to her rear. Elouan hesitated along with the others, praying for Fina's recovery. He didn't know if the combination of his special herbs placed in Marie's exploded bubo were the reason she survived, but if so, he had to do the same here. Only time would tell if his concoction was the saving grace or simply a misguided ruse. The time dragged. Fina remained near the fire, and at Elouan's suggestion, Giovanni enlarged it to where one might think the entire hovel would burn down. Elouan reapplied the herbs on Fina's bubo and kept it dressed, then rotated the torn cloth so as not to apply the stained blood back on the wound. Fina rested as best she could, but found herself languishing into uncontrollable tears. Everyone took turns watching over her. At first, Fina improved, but by the third day, a debilitating fever kept her to the floor. Giovanni refused to leave her side as he poured cool water over her head. As nighttime loomed, filled with anxiety and confusion, Elouan tried meditating under the light of the rising full moon. It was impossible. He couldn't bring himself to focus. The cough caught him by surprise. He siphoned his awareness through his whole body, but found nothing out of sorts. He checked his armpits, felt his thighs at his groin, still nothing. Nonetheless, it left him uneasy. Rachel emerged from the hovel, looking concerned.
I heard you cough.
It may have been nothing.
It is so hard. You know I cannot bear to lose you.
You won't.
Why this is happening. You understand, don't you?
When people believe they are sufficiently divided from each other in class structures, from the environment, isolated and polarized from all other things, life will always find a way to teach the truth of oneness and force us to learn the lessons of that connectedness, to let go of the illusion of individual pride, to finally learn and feel the sacredness of our relation to all that is, to evoke love of an eternal nature.
By morning, Fina deteriorated into a deep delirium. Rachel and Giovanni prayed and watched over her while Elouan worked to gather his thoughts. Instead of traditional seated meditation, he dug a burial for Tvold in the field where the road had perished, using each push of the shovel as a means of focusing his mind. As his senses tunneled, a sudden cough interrupted him again. He buried the shovel and leaned on it, wiping his forehead from sweat. Or was it fever? He shook his head in denial, then paused over Tvold's discolored corpse, wondering if the spirit of the lad had come to unlearn any of his past prejudices from his after-death life review. He hoped so. Another night came and went. When morning blossomed, Rachel took over watching Fina for Giovanni to get some rest. Fina seemed more relaxed, or at least less agitated in her delirium than the day before. Rachel wondered if she were finally on the mend. That is, until Fina shifted her head and revealed a new protrusion on her neck. Startled, Rachel gently pulled down the collar and confirmed the bubo. Then something more. She gingerly lifted Fina's dress to reveal the dark-colored speckles of the plague rash painted all over her flesh. She waked Giovanni.
What?
She hurried outside to fetch Elouan. Giovanni hovered over Fina, fearing the worst. She died by midday. Giovanni wept over his lost sister lying in the freshly dug earth. Rachel took hold of him, while Elouan shouldered the burden of tossing the dirt onto Fina's ruined corpse. Elouan's leather patch swooped down like a leaf falling in autumn. It passed the edges of more dug earth, falling deeper until it landed on Giovanni's chest. It had only been 2 days after Fina's passing that he began to show symptoms, and within another 2 days, he had succumbed, or perhaps just given up in the face of the pestilence. Elouan stood cold over the open grave, too worn to weep. The entire family gone.
He took it from my pack when we first met. The one thing I had from my father. May it bring you more than it has from me.
Elouan brought a hand under his armpit and squinted from the explosion of searing pain.
Let me see.
Elouan lifted his arm and pulled away his shirt. A single bubo burst from his armpit. The sight of it was like a kick in Rachel's stomach. She swooned, then fell to her knees.
Seems I couldn't hold it off forever.
Rachel slumped, waiting for the nausea to dissipate. Her greatest fear was coming to pass. Everyone she knew and loved abandoning her in death. Elouan would be the last.
Breathe deep. My time is not yet through.
A band of papal soldiers marched alongside a string of war horses, bringing the prison carriage behind them. They were led by Father Gilbert riding atop one of the steeds, his face even more gaunt and pasty than before. It was unclear whether he had contracted the pestilence and survived, or if he was just haggard from having to deal with it all.
What are they doing here?
A cool breeze whipped at Elouan, hitting him with a subtle spark inside his consciousness.
They have come to take me to my father.
Almost immediately, his senses went into high alert and his vision tunneled, all without initial intention. Certain confirmation of the papacy's company arriving specifically for him.
There aren't coincidences. Past meets present, all wrapped up.
Wait!
A retinue of 20 armored soldiers halted.
That's him!
Behind the entourage, Jehan appeared atop his stallion. Though clothed in fine, noble fashion, his face contrasted with the veneer as he looked thinner and flesh pallid around the ridges of the cheeks, jaw, and temple. It was clear his plan to outmaneuver the plague failed miserably, but even so, he survived the illness.
He's one of Lucifer's demons, I swear it.
We are here by order of the Grand Inquisitor, not you. But we thank you for your service.
What have you come for? What charges?
Timothy 2:12, my dear. But if you must know, when he touched my brother, he gave him such lethal poison, it twisted his mind. It wasn't long before all those around us were dead from whatever poison he passed on. Nearly the whole of God's kingdom on earth, he has slain.
Rachel boiled at the accusation.
Timothy? Or did they not teach you that in your parish?
Elouan slipped forward, holding his hands ready to receive cuffs. Keeping a wary distance, Gilbert tossed holy water in his face. Elouan froze, but gave no indication of surprise or enmity at the dousing.
He is no demon. He is infected like everyone else.
The soldiers stiffened, keeping the tips of their swords at the ready.
Satan lies. Take him. Take him!
To the relief of the battalion, Elouan moved toward the prison carriage on his own.
No!
Rachel chased, capturing him. The sentries quickly circled, their sword tips at Rachel's throat. Elouan warmly took her hands.
So I see you are in league with him.
No, just deceived by him.
Rachel's heart sank from the look in Elouan's face.
No.
This is my path. I deceived her.
A lone tear cascaded down Rachel's cheek. Terror consumed her as the papal soldiers arrested Elouan and dragged him into the prison carriage. Abandoning all rapport, they slammed shackles on his wrists and ankles, then chained him to the bars. Holy water blinded Rachel as Father Gilbert drenched her squarely in the eyes.
May you rot after your confession.
With that, he mounted his horse and led his squad away, taking Elouan with them. Though splayed inside the cage and clamped in heavy shackles, Elouan managed a relaxed sigh, then closed his eyes to meditate. At last, he no longer felt he was being tossed hither and thither by the events surrounding him. Rather, he knew beyond any doubt he was exactly where he needed to be to meet his father. The fact that he was infected didn't alarm him so much. He trusted the process. If he died, he had faith his mission would be accomplished before the release of his final breath. If he lived, he would move on to whatever was meant to come next. Rachel stood helpless as the caravan grew further distant, her soul scrambling to find a way to stop this madness.
The pestilence has gone from my place. I had it, but it could not overpower me. I was much too strong. I can take you back there.
You wouldn't want me. He had me.
Jehan grimaced with disgust. Whether or not conception had taken place was at this point irrelevant. They both understood that. She had debased herself in sin. What's worse, Jehan truly believed Elouan was the devil's minion, meaning if Rachel was pregnant, she was carrying a diabolical, unholy child. Plus, and this was even more startling, she didn't appear to care. Perhaps she was even proud of it. He shuddered, then curved around, leaving Rachel with the intended view of his stallion's hind end abandoning her to disgrace. The new spring growth made the forest thicker. Perhaps it was this abundance of new life that made those who fled the city believe the air was cleaner and they could survive the devastation. But alas, they were wrong. Father Gilbert could make out a ramshackle lean-to of snapped branches and greenery perched inside a grove of trees, two dirty peasants staring idly alongside, with two hastily dug graves nearby. They watched the papal army pass without a hint of care in their downtrodden faces. Further on the road, vultures plucked at the remains of a dismembered human arm and leg, with the rest of the body nowhere to be found. No doubt pack animals had already made quick work of the vanished corpse. Elouan felt a surge tug his inner awareness. He looked skyward and saw a hawk glide gracefully in a semicircle, then hurriedly flap its wings to ascend over the forest, moving northward. He suppressed a smile, recognizing a message in the bird's flight. Rachel secured the provisions on the horse's back, then attached Hero's hatchet to her hip. She clenched her teeth as she mounted into the saddle, strategizing how to rescue Elouan from the hands of the ecclesiastics. Once settled, she glanced at Giovanni's exposed grave, knowing the unprotected body could and would fall victim to wild animals.
It is just a shell. It is not him. Forgive me, Giovanni, but I think you would understand. Yeah!
Next time on the season finale.
I can't leave you like this.
You need not leave. You can follow, but I must remain prisoner. It is the only way.
We scourge ourselves, O Lord, that you may forgive all mankind of our sins.
I know where they are taking him.
We do as well.
I am told you know why you are here. How do you plead?
I will confess to ultimately forgive you for the lack of mercy you are about to show me.
Confess, demon! Do it now!